Hello, and welcome to the REH Foundation channel. Today we are presenting a very special video in honor of Robert E. Howard's birthday, which is tomorrow, January 22nd. This year, 2026, will be Bob's 120th birthday. Every year for his birthday, Howard fans have a tradition of wishing Bob a happy birthday and then reading one or more of his stories or poems. We've usually posted these wishes in emails, chat groups, Facebook, Twitter, or X, or on our blogs. This year, since we have this YouTube channel, we thought we would get a bunch of us Howard fans, longtime fans, and newly joined fans to make some videos carrying on the tradition. We hope you will enjoy them and join with us on Bob's birthday, January 22nd, to wish him a very happy one and to thank him for all the hours of enjoyment his work has given you. To start off, I thought I would read most of a letter that Bob wrote to Farnsworth Wright, the editor of Weird Tales, when Farnsworth had sent him a letter asking Bob to give a brief autobiography of himself for the Weird Tales readers. This letter was written around June or July of 1931. To Farnsworth Wright, circa June, July 1931. In your last letter, you asked me to give you some information about myself. Well, it is risky to get a writer talking about himself. Ask him to give a brief resume of accomplishments, and he's very likely to inflict his whole biography and philosophy on you. Well, my tale is soon told. I come from old pioneer stock. By nationality, I am predominantly Gaelic, in spite of my English name. Some three-fourths Irish, while the rest is a mixture of English, Highland, Scotch, and Danish. I was born in a little, fading ex-cow town about 30 miles west of Fort Worth. Practically all my life has been spent in the country in some of the Texas cities. I have only a high school education, and not a particularly elaborate one at that. Like the average man, the tale of my life would merely be a dull narration of drab monotony and toil, a grinding struggle against poverty. I have spent most of my time in the bad, barren, semi-wastelands of western Texas, and since infancy my memory holds a continuous grinding round of crop failures, sandstorms, droughts, floods, hot winds that withered the corn, hailstorms that ripped the grain to pieces, late blizzards that froze the crops in the bud, plagues of grasshoppers and boll weevils, and that stripped the cotton. I remember year-long droughts, and that killed the very mesquite trees, when the streams were dry and the cattle ate cactus until their mouths and bellies were full of the spines, and then lay down and died when even the cactus was gone. My boyhood was spent in the oil country, or rather oil came into the country when I was still a young boy, and remained. I'll say one thing about an oil boom. It will teach a kid that life's a pretty rotten thing, about as quick as anything I can think of. I've worked at several jobs, but wasn't a success at any of them. I've picked cotton, helped brand a few yearlings, hauled a little garbage, worked in a grocery store, ditto in a Jewish dry goods store, worked in a law office, jerked soda, worked in a gas office, tried to be a public stenographer, packed a surveyor's rod, worked up oil field news for some Texas and Oklahoma papers, etc., and also etc. I've always had a honing to make my living by writing, ever since I can remember, and while I haven't been a howling success in that line, at least I've managed for several years now to get by without grinding at some time clock, punching job. There's freedom in this game. That's the main reason I chose it. As Service says, in belly pinch I will pay the price, but God let me be free. For once I know in the long ago they made a slave of me. Life's not worth living if somebody thinks he's an authority over you. You gave me my start in the racket by buying my first story, Spear and Fang. I was 18 years old at the time. Pounding out a decent living at the writing game is no snap, but the average man's life is no snap, whatever he does. I'm merely one of a huge army, all of whom are bucking the line one way or another for meat for their bellies, which is the main basic principle and reason and habitual goal of life. Every now and then one of us finds the going too hard and blows his brains out, but it's all in the game, I reckon. And after all, even the bitterness of existence has certain compensations, slight though they may be. To be brought up in the lap of luxury, to live a life of idle pleasure, never to know the bite of cold, the sting of heat, the pangs of hunger, the agony of unceasing toil, the black bitterness of failure, the sordidities of poverty, the blood, the grime, and the sweat. To live such a life is to miss the full grip of human realities. The best way a man can live is by hard slugging, and the best way he can die is with his boots on. Well, I started to tell you something about myself, but there's so little to tell, I'm rather at a loss as to what to say. I've been working at the writing racket pretty regularly since the age of 15 and hope eventually to get somewhere. It's a game I honestly love, and the praise the readers have been kind enough to give me in the Erie has given me an immense amount of sincere pleasure. And there, I believe, is about all the information I can give about a very humdrum and commonplace life. Now that you've heard a little from the man himself about his life and work, here are his fans wishing him a happy birthday.
The Ghost Kings by Robert E. Howard. Happy birthday, Bob. The Ghost Kings are marching. The midnight knows their tread from the distant, stealthy planets of the dim, unstable dead. There are whisperings on the night winds, and the shuddering stars have fled. A ghostly trumpet echoes from the barren mountain head. Through the fen, the wandering witch lights gleam like phantom arrows sped. There is silence in the valleys, and the moon is rising red. The Ghost Kings are marching down the age's dusty maze, the unseen feet are tramping through the moonlight's pallid haze, down the hollow, clanging stairways of a million yesterdays. The Ghost Kings are marching where the vague moon vapor creeps, while the night wind in their coming like a thunderous herald sweeps. They are clad in ancient grandeur, but the world unheeding sleeps. Happy 120th birthday, Robert E. Howard. That one was from Weird Tales in December 1938. It's not bad for a guy who had died 2 years before.
Thank you for so many years of wonderful stories and adventures, Robert E. Howard. You are the finest pulp writer that ever was and probably ever will be. And it's an absolute honor to be able to contribute even the tiniest bit to your legacy. As part of the celebration for your birthday this year, a bunch of us are doing readings from different stories and poems that we find very inspiring. And so I'm going to read a small section here from God in the Bowl. It's one of the most interesting paced kind of Conan stories, but also one of my favorites because it builds this kind of simmering tension page after page until it all explodes in this section here that I am about to read to you. All right. Enough of this, growled Dionys, eyeing the silent Cimmerian. The prefect lifted his hand. Conan's eyes began to burn bluely, and a tension crackled in the air, when an interruption came. A guardsman entered, dragging a slender, richly dressed figure. I saw him slinking about the back of the temple, quoth the guard, looking for commendation. Instead, he received curses that lifted his hair. Release that gentleman, you bungling fool, swore the prefect. Don't you know Astrius Patanius, the nephew of the city's governor? The abashed guard fell away, and the foppish young nobleman brushed his embroidered sleeve fastidiously. Save your apologies, good Dionys, he lisped affectedly. All in the line of duty, I know. I was returning from a late revel and walking to rid my brain of the wine fumes. What have we here? By Mitra, is it murder? Murder it is, my lord, answered the prefect, but we have a man who, though Demetrio seems to have doubts on the matter, will doubtless go to the stake for it. A vicious-looking brute, murmured the young aristocrat. How can any doubt his guilt? I have never seen such a villainous countenance before. Yes, you have, you scented dog, snarled the Cimmerian, when you hired me to steal the Zamorian goblet for you. Revels, eh? Bah! You were waiting in the shadows for me to hand you the goblet. I would not have revealed your name if you had given me fair words. Now tell these dogs what you saw me climb the wall after the watchman made the last round, so that they'll know I didn't have time to kill this fat swine before Arius entered and found the body. Demetrio quickly looked at Astrius, who did not change color. If what he says is true, my lord, said the inquisitor, it clears him of the murder, and we can easily hush up the matter of attempted theft. He is due 10 years hard labor for housebreaking, but if you say the word will arrange for him to escape, and none of us will ever know anything about it. I understand you wouldn't be the first nobleman who had to resort to such things to pay gambling debts and the like. You can rely on our discretion. Conan looked at the young noble expectantly, but Astræus shrugged his slender shoulders and covered a yawn with a delicate white hand. I know him not, he answered. He is mad to say I hired him. Let him take his just deserts. He has a strong back, and the toil in the mines will be well for him. Conan's eyes blazed, and he started as if stung. The guards tensed, grasping their bills, then relaxed as he dropped his head suddenly, as if in sullen resignation, and not even Demetrio could tell that he was watching them from under his heavy black brows, with eyes that were slits of blue balefire. He struck with no more warning than a striking cobra. His sword flashed in the candlelight. Astræus shrieked, and his head flew from his shoulders in a shower of blood, the features frozen in a white mask of horror. Cat-like, Conan wheeled and thrust murderously for Demetrio's groin. The Inquisitor's instinctive recoil barely deflected the point which sank into his thigh, glanced from the bone and plowed out through the outer side of the leg. Demetrio went to his knee with a groan, unnerved and nauseated with agony. Conan had not paused. The bill which Dionis flung up saved the prefect's skull from the whistling blade which turned slightly as it cut through the shaft and sheared his ear cleanly from his head. The blinding speed of the barbarian paralyzed the senses of the police and made their actions futile gestures. Caught flat-footed and dazed by his quickness and ferocity, half of them would have been down before they had a chance to fight back, except that Posthumo, more by luck than skill, threw his arms about the Cimmerian, pinioning his sword arm. Conan's left hand leapt to the guard's head, and Posthumo fell away and writhed, shrieking on the floor, clutching a gaping red socket where an eye had been. Conan bounded from the waving bills, and his leap carried him outside the ring of his foes, to where Arius stood fumbling at his crossbow. A savage kick in the belly dropped him, green-faced and gagging, and Conan's sandaled heel crunched square in the watchman's mouth. The wretch screamed through a ruin of splintered teeth, blowing bloody froth from his mangled lips. Man, oh man, nobody does it like Howard. That action, that energy, that explosion of it's so amazing, and it's the kind of stuff that summons just the most imaginative and amazing imagery in my mind. And that kind of stuff just inspires me. It inspires me when I write, and it inspires me when I think about, the verbiage and the poetry I try and put into the narration in the official Conan comics. So again, thanks for letting me be part of this, and may your swords be ever sharp.
So, happy birthday to Robert E. Howard. I don't know of any other pulp writer that wrote so well in so many different genres. And I'm not really a horror fan, but I read his horror stories. And I don't read H. Rider Haggard, but I read his adventure stories. And I don't do much historical fiction, but I read his Viking stories and his Crusader stories. And of course, there's Conan, there's Elborak, there's his Westerns, there's Solomon Kane. Of all the pulp writers, whether it's Dashiell Hammett or Hamilton or any genre, Robert E. Howard was excelling in almost all of them. Boxing stories? Let's go read some Sailor Steve Costigan. Robert E. Howard is one of the greatest American writers that we've had. And the fact that he was pulp does not diminish what he accomplished. So whether you're discovering new things, you're rereading Conan for the 10th time, Robert E. Howard is a great writer. And he's also got a community that's formed around him that are a lot of like-minded people that appreciate his work. And then we like talking about him, and we like talking with each other about him. So I think the fact that Robert Howard brings us together 120 years from his birthday is amazing. And I'm just glad to be a part of this community. So happy birthday to Robert E. Howard.
I would like to wish the happiest of birthdays to Bob Howard, January 22nd. I'm going to celebrate by referring to Bobby Derie's Robert E. Howard Bar Guide. I think I might make a toast with a Pabst Blue Ribbon. For a special event, I am going to share a musical version of one of Robert E. Howard's poems. It's going to be a song form of the chant demoniac. And if you don't know the poem, I'll recite it here. I am Satan, I am weary, for my road is long and hard. I ride through regions dreary, since the golden gates were barred. I wait by the flaming gates. I give men death, and they give me hate. I am Satan, never resting, for the scourge is at my back. Yonder soul his crimes attesting, to the fire, to the rack. Yet another and another, will this tally never cease? Turn from sin, I beg, my brother. Give a weary demon peace. I am Satan, I am weary, by the ever-flaming sea, ye who tread my regions dreary. Sinners, sinners, pity me. So I look forward to sharing that in song. Happiest of birthdays to Bob Howard. Thank you so much. I am a latecomer to Bob Howard in a lot of ways. You know, growing up, Conan was omnipresent in my life. And it wasn't until my 40s, so about a decade now, that I've actually, just dived in and discovered and enjoyed the community that celebrates Bob. Happy birthday, Bob. Thanks for everything that you've introduced to my life.
A wild moon rode the wide white clouds, the waves in white crests flowed, when Solomon Kane went forth again, and no man knew his road. They glimpsed him etched against the moon, where clouds on hilltops thinned. They heard an eerie echoed call that whistled down the wind. Happy birthday, Robert E. Howard. Thank you for all the wonderful stories, you madman, you.
Well, in honor of Howard's birthday, I chose The Frost Giant's Daughter. Somehow, this story, and I still don't know how, was rejected by Farnsworth Wright, but to me, it's one of the best Conan stories. I describe it as savage poetry in the cold north. It feels like myth, and in a sense, it was adapted from the Greek myth of Daphne and Apollo. But to me, it feels like northern myth, a Valkyrie gone bad, not collecting the bodies of the slain, but instead leading them to their deaths. You can find a terrific adaptation in Savage Sword of Conan #1 by Roy Thomas and Barry Windsor Smith, if you're lucky enough to own one, and I happen to have one right here. But for this video, I'm going to read the first 2 paragraphs from the original unpublished story from my Del Rey, of course. So here we are, the first 2 paragraphs, of The Frost Giant's Daughter. The clangor of the swords had died away. The shouting of the slaughter was hushed. Silence lay on the red-stained snow. The bleak pale sun that glittered so blindingly from the ice fields and the snow-covered plains struck sheens of silver from rent corselet and broken blade where the dead lay as they had fallen. The nerveless hand yet gripped the broken hilt, helmeted heads back-drawn from the death throes, tilted red beards and golden beards grimly upward, as if in last invocation to Ymir the frost giant, god of a warrior race. Across the red drifts and mail-clad forms, 2 figures glared at each other. In that utter desolation, only they moved. The frosty sky was over them, the white, illimitable plain around them, the dead men at their feet. Slowly through the corpses they came, as ghosts might come to a tryst through the shambles of a dead world. In the brooding silence, they stood face to face. That's poetry. So happy birthday, Bob. Your soul lives on in a literary Valhalla.
Happy birthday, Howard heads. We've been lucky to have the work of Robert E. Howard in all of our lives, uniting people from around the world for well over a century. It was the birthing cry of sword and sorcery, a genre I am quite fond of, and he's created such an impressive body of work spanning from boxing stories to fantasy to poetry. And I hope all of you will take the time today to savor just a little bit of that, whether you be a longtime reader of Robert E. Howard or someone just beginning to take the plunge. And at least on his birthday, I'd like to share one of my favorite works of his, a poem that will be appearing in the first issue of my magazine, Battle, by the title, The Road of Kings. When I was a fighting man, the kettle drums they beat, the people scattered gold dust before my horse's feet, But now I am a great king, the people hound my track, with poison in my wine cup and daggers at my back. Gleaming shell of an outworn lie, fable of right divine. You gained your crowns by heritage, but blood was the price of mine. The throne that I won by blood and sweat, by crom I will not sell, for promise of valleys filled with gold or threat of the halls of hell. What do I know of the cultured ways, the guilt, the craft, and the lie? I, who was born in a naked land and bred in the open sky, the subtle tongue, the sophist guile, they fail when broadswords swing. Rush in and die, dogs! I was a man before I was a king.
Hey, Jeff Shanks here. Good to see everybody. We're here celebrating Bob Howard's birthday. As many of you know, it's often a tradition for those of us that are big Howard fans to read an excerpt of Howard's work, maybe have a sip of our favorite adult beverage. So I'm going to be doing that this evening. So I've decided this evening what I'm going to read is an excerpt from the story Wolf's Head. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's one of Howard's first or earliest published works in Weird Tales. It was his third story that was published in Weird Tales, published in the April 1926 issue. And I've actually got one of those original Weird Tales here. I'll show you guys. We're going to read a little bit out of this story. So Wolf's Head, for me, I've always been kind of fascinated by it. It's actually the second appearance of what was Robert E. Howard's first professionally published recurring character, a character named Demontour, a sort of French cavalier who gets turned into a werewolf. And he appeared in two different stories. He appeared in the forest of Villefort in 1925, and then in the sequel, Wolf's Head. And this is actually the first Robert E. Howard story to make the cover of Weird Tales. Third published story, first cover story, published in the April 1926 issue. That means that we're actually coming up on the 100th anniversary of this story. It probably would have been on the newsstands in February of 1926. So this werewolf character of Howard's, like I said, he's one of Howard's first published recurring characters, and one that I've always been kind of fascinated with, and one who I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm working on a project related to this character coming up. So what I wanted to do was read an excerpt from right out of the original Weird Tales here, where he gives his origin story. So all right, so we're going to jump right into the story here. This is Demontour giving his origin story. Years ago, said Demontour, I was upon a military mission in northern France. Alone, I was forced to pass through the fiend-haunted woodlands of Villefort. In those frightful forests, I was beset by an inhuman, a ghastly thing, a werewolf. Beneath a midnight moon, we fought, and I slew it. Now this is the truth, that if a werewolf is slain in the half form of a man, its ghost will haunt the slayer through eternity. But if it's slain as a wolf, hell gapes to receive it. The true werewolf is not, as many think, a man who may take the form of a wolf, but a wolf who takes the form of a man. Now listen, friend, and I will tell you of the wisdom of the hellish knowledge that is mine, gained through many a frightful deed imported to me amid the ghastly shadows of midnight forests, where fiends and half-beasts roam. In the beginning, the world was strange, misshapen. Grotesque beasts wandered through the jungles, driven from another world. Ancient demons and fiends came in great numbers and settled upon this newer, younger world. Long the forces of good and evil warred. A strange beast known as man wandered among other beasts. And since good or bad must have a concrete form, ere either accomplishes its desire, the spirits of good entered man. The fiends entered other beasts, reptiles and birds, and long and fiercely waged the age-old battle, but man conquered. The great dragons and serpents were slain, and with them the demons. Finally, Solomon, wise beyond the ken of man, made great war upon them, and by virtue of his wisdom slew, seized, and bound. But there were some which were the fiercest, the boldest, and though Solomon drove them out, could not conquer them. These had taken the form of wolves. As the ages passed, wolf and demon became merged. No longer could the fiend leave the body of the wolf at will. In many instances, the savagery of the wolf overcame the subtlety of the demon and enslaved him. So the wolf became again only a beast, a fierce, cunning beast, but merely a beast. But of the werewolves, there are many, even yet. And during the time of the full moon, the wolf may take the form, or the half form, of a man. When the moon hovers at its zenith, however, the wolf spirit again takes ascendancy and the werewolf becomes a true wolf once more. But if it is slain in the form of a man, then the spirit is free to haunt the slayer through the ages. Hearken now. I had thought to have slain the thing after it had changed to its true shape, but I slew it an instant too soon. The moon, though it approached the zenith, had not yet reached it, nor had the thing taken on fully the wolf form. Of this I knew nothing, and went my way. But when the next time approached for the full moon, I began to be aware of a strange malicious influence. An atmosphere of horror hovered in the air, and I was aware of inexplicable, uncanny impulses. One night in a small village in the center of a great forest, the influence came upon me, and with full power. It was night, and the moon, nearly full, was rising over the forest. And between the moon between the moon and me, I saw, floating in the upper air, ghostly and barely discernible, the outline of a wolf's head. I remember little of what happened thereafter. I remember dimly clambering into the silent street. Remember struggling, resisting briefly, vainly, and the rest is a crimson haze, until I came to myself the next morning and found my garments and hands raked and stained crimson, and heard the horrified chattering of the villagers, telling of a pair of clandestine lovers slaughtered in a ghastly manner, scarcely outside the village, torn to pieces as if by wild beasts, as if by wolves. From that village I fled aghast, but I fled not alone. In the day I could not feel the drive of my fearful captor. But when night fell and the moon rose, I ranged the silent forest, a frightful thing, a slayer of humans, a fiend in a man's body. God, the battles I have fought, that always it overcame me and drove me, ravening after some new victim. But after the moon had passed its fullness, the thing's power over me ceased suddenly, nor did it return until 3 nights before the moon was full again. Since then, I have roamed the world, fleeing, seeking to escape. Always the thing follows, taking possession of my body when the moon is full. Gods, the frightful deeds I've done. I would have slain myself long ago, but I dare not. For the soul of it, for the soul of a suicide is accursed, and my soul would be forever hunted through the flames of hell. And hearken, most frightful of all, my slain body would forever roam the earth, moved and inhabited by the soul of the werewolf. Can any thought be more ghastly? And I seem immune to the weapons of man. Swords have pierced me, daggers have hacked me. I am covered with scars, yet never have they struck me down. In Germany, they bound and led me to the block. There would I have willingly placed my head, but the thing came upon me, and breaking my bonds, I slew and fled. Up and down the world I have wandered, leaving horror and slaughter in my trail. Chains, cells cannot hold me. The thing is fastened to me through all eternity. So that's a passage from Wolf's Head. That's sort of the origin story of Damon Tour, Howard's werewolf character. one of the most fascinating and underrated of his characters that really probably deserves a lot more attention. I'm actually hoping to, as I said, to do a project involving Dave Montour here in the future. So look forward to that. I hope you enjoyed this excerpt from one of Howard's earliest published stories, and on the near 100th anniversary of its publication. And speaking of anniversaries, this is the 120th anniversary, or would have been the 120th anniversary of Robert E. Howard's birth. And so, on that note, let's raise a glass. Let's have a toast to Two Gun Bob. Happy birthday, Bob. Sláinte.
Hi, my name is Andreea. I'm relatively new to Robert T. Howard, but so far I have loved every single thing I've read by him. He's extraordinary. And I thought for his birthday I would read a short poem that he's written called Black Seas. And this is from the book Shadows of Dreams, and it's poetry by Robert T. Howard and pictures by Richard Barry. And I'm going to try to put a few on the screen. I also have his little friend H.P. Lovecraft here for emotional support. So I'm going to read it now. Black Seas. I have heard black seas booming in the night on dim uncharted shores beneath the stars, with reefs that never gleamed to mortal sight and winds that never hastened man-hewn spars. I waver on the threshold of my choice, O silver stars that gleam in oceans black, for through the night there sounds a nameless voice, who ride the dusky seas, they come not back. Happy birthday, Bob.
Hey, this is Bobby Derie. I'm a member of the board of the Robert E. Howard Foundation, author of Weird Tailors, essays on Robert E. Howard and others, and several other books. And I'm here to wish Robert E. Howard a happy birthday. I'd like to read to you a selection from one of his letters to H.P. Lovecraft. As a boy and a youth in my teens, I read purely for the love of reading. I can say with confidence that no man, however mature, ever loved reading for its own sake more than I. I did not read because of any particular urge for learning, or to merely pass the time, or to escape the realities of life. I read simply because I loved reading for its own sake alone. The printed page was like wine to me. Books were scarce in the country. I could not go into a library or bookstore and select what I wanted. I had to read whatever came to my hand, and I did, and generally enjoyed it supremely. Perhaps that accounts in part for my still rather indiscriminate taste. If I had tried to pick and choose in my early youth, damned little I'd have ever read. I was not critical. I never tried to analyze what I read. I was simply and sincerely grateful for whatever chance put into my hands. Often I would read a book through and without pausing, turn back to the first and read it through again, sometimes repeating this 3 or 4 times. As a youngster, I would sometimes skip a paragraph here and there in order to thrill over its newness when I reread it. My own library was generally the largest in the place I lived, but it was small. I generally was given a book on Christmas and on my birthday. Occasionally, between times, a book was bought. For the rest, I borrowed whenever I could. My main source of reading material were the handmade bookcases which served for libraries in the country schools. Each tiny school had one, and the contents were small but varied. In the summer, I regularly raided these libraries. During the long summer vacations, which usually lasted 6 or 7 months, schools and bookcases were kept locked and barred. Then I made my raids. Occasionally, I could obtain the key and permission to read the books so guarded. But refusal did not halt me. In my passionate quest for reading material, nothing could have halted me but a bullet through the head. With a flour sack tied to my saddle horn, I raided isolated schoolhouses far up the creeks, in the hills, and in villages. I jimmied the doors or windows of the buildings and pried the locks off the solidly made bookcases. If that failed, I removed the hinges. Then, with my flour sack saddlebag full of books, I departed in a cloud of dust, oblivious to the maledictions sometimes directed my way. I did not steal these books. I always returned them in as good a shape as I took them. But I had to read, and I did read, even in the teeth of threats to have the law on me. It was a matter beyond my control. Literature of one sort or another was meat and drink and the wine of life to me. Robert E. Howard to H.P. Lovecraft, 15 June 1933. And, Robert E. Howard was probably exaggerating a little. He was a Texan. He liked to tell tall tales. But there is something in that paragraph I've always loved. It's just the way he tells a story, the way he expresses that emotion, that need for knowledge. His love of reading comes through more strongly in that page of text, in that long letter, than in anything else he ever wrote. And I love it. So, Bob, I hope there's a library in heaven.
Happy birthday to Bob and all his fans. In honor of Robert E. Howard's birthday, I'm going to read a poem from the omnibus first edition of the collected poetry of Robert E. Howard, one of my favorite poems. It reflects Howard's thoughts on civilization and barbarism, and it's entitled A Song of the Naked Lands. You lolled in gardens where breezes fanned the blossoms shivering shard, but we were bred in a naked land where life was bitter hard. You raped the grapes of their purple soul for your wine cups brimming high. We stooped to the dregs of the muddy hole that was bitter with alkali. And you grew flabby and round of limb, short of nerve and breath. We grew rugged and lean and grim in our naked grip with death. Silk was too harsh for your dainty skin, red wine too poor for your draught. We hunted the holes that the rain stood in and stripped the woof for our clout. Round were your bellies, soft your hand, soft with the fat of the earth. Yours was the wealth of a smiling land, ours the desert's dearth. You sang beneath the locust tree, forgetful of hunger and hate. It has always been, it will always be. Even then we were at your gate. You lolled by fountain and golden hall until that frenzied morn, when we burst the gates and breached the walls and cut you down like corn. We reaped the yield and we plowed the field with red and dripping shares, and you could not fight and you could not run. You could only die like hares. Grim was the barter, red the trade, with dripping swords for coins, and your women screamed in the trampled sand with bruised and bleeding loins. Skilled was the brain and skilled the hand that shaped the stubborn stone. Rain spilled on the bloody sand when iron split the bone. The hand that traced the gilded frieze that scrolled the written page. It could not turn the driven steel, backed by the primal rage. Of what avail the harp and lute, dim girdle and purple cloak, when the dripping axe was smiting home and the flame and the blinding smoke? Blood smeared your satin and silk and lace. You heard your children moan, and your elders howled in the marketplace when we stripped them skin from bone. And where your bearded judges sat and bade men live or die, the naked slayer roared and waved a bloody scalp on high. Over the ruins arched and spired the billowing smoke cloud waves, and you who lived when the sword was tired, you live but as our slaves. Our hard hands clutch your golden cups, our rough feet crush your flowers. We stable our horses in your halls, and all your wealth is ours. We have doffed our wolfskin clouts for silks. We wear them clumsily. Our eyes are bleak, our beards unshorn, our matted locks stream free. But our sons will trim their beards and hair, don cloaks of crimson hue. They will take your daughters to their beds till they grow soft as you. They will trade their freedom for harps and lutes, discard the bow and the dart. They will build a prison of satin and gold, call it culture and art. They will lie in the lap of a smiling land till it rusts, unman, and rot them. And they scorn their blood and the calloused hand and the fathers who begot them. But our brothers still dwell in the sun-seared waste. Their sons are hard and lank. They will hunt the wolf pack that we chased and drink the water we drank. The hungers we knew, they too will know, the scars of fangs and of briars. In the rocks where they crouch when the sunstorms blow, they will find the marks of our fires. They will know the hungers that we once had, while the stream of centuries runs, till they burst from the desert hunger mad to slaughter our slothful sons. Happy birthday, Bob, and all his fans.
I'm with Dr. Dierk Gunther, a Robert E. Howard scholar. He got his doctorate on doing a thesis on Robert E. Howard. What was your thesis with Robert E. Howard that you got your doctorate in, Dierk?
That was history in Robert E. Howard's fantastic fiction from the Hyborian age to Texas, modern Texas history.
And he's also written many articles on Robert E. Howard, and he is going to give his birthday wish. So I will turn it over to you.
Okay, happy birthday, Robert E. Howard. Happy birthday from Japan. Thanks for all the great work, the joy I had from reading your wonderful stories, and which, made me the person I am today. And for your 120th birthday, I'm reading probably The Great God Passes and even Lord of the Dead, because both of them, these stories are totally, totally awesome. And also not Conan stories, which I also like. Anyway, thank you very much, and celebrations, and virtual sake. Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, Shawn here from Heroic Signatures. I run the official Conan YouTube channel and all the social media accounts. Today is a very important day. It is Robert E. Howard's 120th birthday.
Happy birthday!
Happy 120th birthday to Robert E. Howard, to Gun Bob himself.
You caught me reading my favorite author. His name's Robert E. Howard, and it's his 120th birthday. Amazing!
Hey, this is Chris, editor of the Conan comics with Titan Comics and Heroic Signatures. Want to wish you a fantastic birthday, Bob.
To celebrate this occasion, I'm going to read one of my favorite Robert E. Howard poems. I am a big fan of the horror genre, so it's only fitting that I chose something from the horror stories of Robert E. Howard. This is an incredible book that you can get anywhere online, your local bookstore. Highly recommend picking up a copy if you don't already have one. The poem is called A Song of the Werefolk. Sink white fangs in the throat of life, lap up the red that gushes. In the cold dark gloom of the bare black stones, in the gorge where the black wind rushes. Sink where the Titan boulders poise, and the chasms grind thereunder. Over the mountains, black and bare, in the teeth of the brooding thunder. Why should we wish for the fertile fields, valley and crystal fountain? This is our doom, the hunger trail, the wolf and the storm-stalked mountain. Over us stalk the bellowing gods, where the dusk and the twilight sever. Under their iron goatish hoofs, they crunch our skulls forever. Mercy and hope and pity all bubbles the black crag sunder. Hunger is all the gods have left, and the death that lurks thereunder. Glut mad veins in the blood of life, to slake the thirst past sating. Before the blind worms mouth our bones, and the vulture's beak is grating. Absolutely incredible. I read Wolf's Head earlier this year for the first time. An incredible story. And one of the things I love about Robert E. Howard is that even if he wrote about a type of creature that we've heard many stories about, such as werewolves, he always has a unique spin that blows my mind. I highly recommend checking out Wolf's Head, reading this poem, picking up this book, and read a story today in Howard's honor.
which will scarcely be understood. Small poets sing of little foolish things, as more befitting a shallow brain, that dream not of pre-Atlantean kings, nor launches on that dark uncharted main, that holds grim islands and unholy tides, where many a black mysterious secret hides. True rhyme concerns her not with bursting buds, the chirping bird, the lifting of the rose, save ebon blooms that swell in ghastly woods, and that grim voiceless bird that ever broods, where through black boughs a wind of horror blows. O little singers, what know you of those ungodly slimy shapes that glide and crawl out of unreckoned gulfs when midnight falls, to haunt the poet slumbering and close against his eyes, thrust up their hissing head, and mock him with their eyes so serpent red? Conceived and bred in blackened pits of hell, the poems come that set the stars on fire, born of black maggots, writhing in a shell men call a poet's skull, an iron bell, filled up with burning mist and golden mire. The royal purple is a moldy shroud, the laurel crown is cypress filled with thorns, the sword of fame a sickle notched and dull, the face of beauty is a grinning skull, and ever in their souls' red caverns loud the rattle of the cloven hooves and horns. The poets know that justice is a lie, that good and light are baubles filled with dust. This world's slave market where swine sell and buy, this shambles where the howling cattle die, has blinded not their eyes with lies and lust. Ring up the demons from the lower pit, since evil conquers goodness in the end. Break down the door and let the fires be lit, and greet each slavering monster as a friend. Let obscene shapes of darkness ride the earth, let sacrificial smokes blot out the skies, let dying virgins glut the black god's eyes, and all the world resound with noisome mirth. Break down the altars, let the streets run red, tramp down the race into the crawling slime, where chaos lifts her serpent's head, the fiend be praised, will pen the perfect rhyme. Happy birthday, Robert E. Howard.
Hello everyone, my name is Chris and I'm from the YouTube channel Liminal Spaces. And I just wanted to really quickly say a few words on Robert E. Howard's birthday. Robert E. Howard was an incredible writer. His prose is fantastic. And he wrote with a depth that is just really brilliant to behold. So I am very proud to be part of this video wishing Robert E. Howard a happy birthday. What I'm going to be reading for Robert Howard's birthday this year is Iron Shadows in the Moon from the Coming of Conan book. I've been reading all these Conan stories in the order that they were written because that's how they're put in this book. So I'm very excited to read that. So yeah, happy birthday to Robert E. Howard. He touched a lot of lives with his writing, including my own. Even though I was late to the party, I am so glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Greetings, everyone. It's Grammaticus from Grammaticus Books, and today, in honor of Robert E. Howard's birthday, I'm going to be reading a short excerpt from The Frost Giant's Daughter, one of my favorite short stories of Robert E. Howard's of all time. And to sort of set the scene here, I'll give you a little bit of backstory, and then I'm going to read about one page worth of The Frost Giant's Daughter. This is Conan as a young man. He has traveled north from his homeland of Samaria, and he's with a band of the Aesir on a raiding party in Nordheim. And he is the sole survivor of a battle between the Vanir and the Aesir, when Atali, the Frost Giant's daughter, comes to him on the battlefield and enchants him and drives him crazy with desire, and he pursues her into the frozen wastes of Nordheim, which is her plan as she leads him to what she believes is going to be his destruction, out of the realm of mortals, out of the mortal world, and into the realm of the gods, of the gods, where she's going to have him killed by her frost giant brothers. And so that's where we're going to pick up here with the story. I'm going to read you about this one page worth of this story. Please enjoy it. But before you can read Robert E. Howard, you have to have two items of power with you in order to do so. One is a blade. So we have the blade. We can check that. And the other is you have to have a beer. So we've got the beer here as well. And this beer has been carefully chosen. Since Robert E. Howard is from Texas, I've gotten Modelo, and something tells me that Robert E. Howard would be a dark beer drinker. So this is Modelo Dark. So here we go. Pop that baby off. Soothe the throat. That's pretty good. And then we're going to read The Frost Giant's Daughter. Above him, the skies glowed and crackled with strange lights and gleams. The snow shone weirdly, now frosty blue, now icy crimson, now cold silver. Through a shimmering icy realm of enchantment, Conan plunged doggedly onward, in a crystalline maze where the only reality was the white body dancing across the glittering snow beyond his reach, ever beyond his reach. He did not wonder at the strangeness of it all, not even when two gigantic figures rose up to bar his way. The scales of their mail were white with hoarfrost. Their helmets and their axes were covered with ice. Snow sprinkled their locks, and their beards were spikes of icicles, and their eyes were as cold as the lights that streamed above them. "Brothers," cried the girl, dancing between them, "look who follows. I have brought you a man to slay. Take his heart that we may lay it smoking on our father's board." The giants answered with roars like the grinding of icebergs on frozen shore, and heaved up their shining axes as the maddened Cimmerian hurled himself upon them. A frosty blade flashed before his eyes, blinding him with its brightness, and he gave back a terrible stroke that sheared through his foe's thigh. With a groan, the victim fell, and at that instant Conan was dashed into the snow, his left shoulder numb from the blow of the survivor, from which the Cimmerian's mail had barely saved his life. Conan saw the remaining giant looming high above him like a colossus carved of ice, etched against the cold, glowing sky. The axe fell to sink through the snow and deep into the frozen earth as Conan hurled himself aside and leaped to his feet. The giant roared and wrenched his axe free, but even as he did, Conan's sword sang down. The giant's knees bent, and he sank slowly into the snow, which turned crimson with the blood that gushed from his half-severed neck. Conan wheeled to see the girl standing a short distance away, staring at him in wide-eyed horror, all the mockery gone from her face. He cried out fiercely, and the blood drops flew from his sword as his hand shook in the intensity of his passion. "Call the rest of your brothers," he cried. "I'll give their hearts to the wolves." And that is The Frost Giant's Daughter by Robert E. Howard. Happy birthday, Bob.
This is Red Thunder by Robert E. Howard. Thunder in the black skies, beating down the rain. Thunder in the black cliffs, looming o'er the main. Thunder in the black sea, and thunder in my brain. God is on the night wind, Satan's on his throne, by the red lake lurid and the great grim stone. Through the roofs of hell the brooding thunders drone. Trident for a rapier, Satan thrusts and foins, crouching on the throne with his great goat loins. Souls are his footstools, and hearts are his coins. Slave of all the ages, though lord of the air, Solomon overcame him and set him roaring there, crouching on the coals where the great flames flare. Thunder from the grim gulfs out of cosmic deep, where the red eyes glimmer and the black wings sweep. Thunder down to Satan and wake him from his sleep. Thunder on the shores of hell, scattering the coal, riding down the mountain on the moon's fair full, blasting out the caves of the gnome and the troll. Satan, brother Satan, rise and break your chain. Solomon is dust and his spells grow vain. Rise through the world in the thunder and the rain. Rush upon the cities, roaring in your might. Break down the towers in the moon pale light. Build a wall of corpses for God's great sight, and quench the red thunder in my brain this night. Next, I will do the Ride of Falum, which is a little tougher rhyme scheme. The loom of Spain rode forth amain when twilight's crimson fell, to drink a toast with Bahram's ghost in the scarlet land of hell. His rowels crashed around him, dashed along the flaming skies. The sunset rode at his bridle braid, and the moon was in his eyes. The waves were green upon the eerie sheen o'er the hills of Thule, and the ripples beat to his horse's feet like a serpent in a pool. On vampire wings the shadow things wheeled around and round his head, till at last he came to the kingdom vast and the land of the restless dead. They thronged about in a grisly rout, they caught at his silver rein. Avant, fell host, tell Bahram's ghost, Falum has come from Spain. In flame arrayed arose Bahram's shade. What would you have me, Falum? Oh, Bahram, who on earth I slew, where Tigris waters boom. Now, though I shore your life of yore amid the burning west, I ride to hell to bid ye tell, where might I ride to rest? My beard is white, and dim my sight, and I would be fain gone. Speak without guile, where lies the isle of mystic Avalon? A league beyond the western wind, a mile beyond the moon, where the dim seas roar on an unknown shore, and the drifting stars lie strewn. The lotus buds there soon scent the woods, where the quiet rivers gleam, and king and knight in mystic light in ages drowse and dream. With sudden bound Falun wheeled rout, and fled through the flying wrack, till again he came to the land of Spain, with the sunset at his back. No dreams for me, just roaming free, red wine and battle's roar. I'll breast the gales and ride the trails, until I can ride no more. Happy birthday.
Okay. Hey guys, it's Lion here from the Sword and Sorcery Book Club. I recently became a fan of Robert E. Howard in the last couple of years, and I was asked to join this great moment here to celebrate Robert E. Howard's 120th birthday of this year. And so, in order to celebrate that, I'm going to read you an excerpt from Cole, Exile of Atlantis. I'm going to read the last bit of the first story here called Exile of Atlantis, at least by the creators of this book right here. And so let's begin. They arose in the morning and set out for the caves of the tribe. The sun was not yet high when the broad blue river met their gaze, and the caverns of the tribe rose to view. Look, Amra cried out sharply. They burned someone. A heavy stake stood before the caves. Thereon, with a young girl bound. The people who stood about, hard-eyed, showed no sign of pity. Allah, said Gorna, his face setting into unbending lines. She married a Lemurian pirate, the Wanton. I, broke in a stony-eyed old woman, my own daughter. Thus she brought shame on Atlantis. My daughter no longer. Her mate died. She was washed ashore when their ship was broken by the craft of Atlantis. Cole eyed the girl compassionately. He couldn't understand why did these people, her own kin and blood, frown on her so, merely because she chose an enemy of her race. In all the eyes that were centered on her, Cole saw only one trace of sympathy. Amra's strange blue eyes were sad and compassionate. What Cole's own immobile face mirrored, there is no knowing. But the eyes of the doomed girl rested on his. There was no fear in her fine eyes, but a deep and vibrant appeal. Cole's gaze wandered to the faggots at her feet. Soon the priest, who now chanted a curse beside her, would stoop and light these with the torch which he now held in his left hand. Cole saw that she was bound to the stake with a heavy wooden chain, a peculiar thing, which was typically Atlantean in its own manufacture. He could not sever that chain, even if he reached her, through the throng that barred his way. Her eyes implored him. He gazed at the faggots, touched the long flint dagger at his girdle. She understood, nodded, relief flooding her eyes. Cole struck as suddenly and unexpectedly as a cobra. He snatched the dagger from his girdle, and he threw it. Fairly under the heart it struck, killing her instantly. While the people stood spellbound, Cole wheeled, bounded away, and ran up the sheer side of the cliff for 20 feet like a cat. The people stood struck dumb. Then a man whipped up a bow and arrow and sighted along the smooth shaft. Cole was heaving himself over the lip of the cave. The bowman's eyes narrowed. Armora, as if by accident, lurched headlong into him, and the arrow sang wide and aside. Then Cole was gone. He heard them screaming on his track, his own tribesmen, fired with bloodlust. wild to run him down and slay him for violating the strange and bloody code for morals. But no man in Atlantis, and that means no man in the world, could foot it with Cole of the Sea Mountain tribe. So that's the last bit of the story. And the reason I picked it is because I really love this introduction to Cole. He has a lot of empathy, but he's also a very hard kind of man, right? And this develops into his kind of like kingliness later on in the stories. And so I really enjoy this passage. I think it was one of my favorite stories, even though it's a fragment. It's not a finalized story by Robert E. Howard, but it's just one that I really, really like. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that reading. Thank you guys very much for joining me on this celebration of Robert E. Howard's birthday. And I'll see you guys at Howard Days, this year. So thank you guys very much.
A Crown for a King. And I picked this one because there are very few heroic sword and sorcery kind of poetry that Bob did. There's a lot of headings, but for stories and chapters, but there's very few separate poems written for this. So here's one of them that a lot of people may not know. Crown for a King. A roar of battle thundered in the hills. All day our iron blades drank deep in blood. Till lighted with the flame the sunset spills, we saw against our backs the river's flood. Among its rocks the waters screamed and raced. We had our choice, we who were rebel slaves, to die beneath the horrors that we faced, or die amid the horrors of the waves. Aye, we were men who lined the roaring merge, and spears and insults at our foemen hurled. They were not men who gathered for the charge, but demons of blood-black elder world. But even risen slaves may have a king. We had a king like some great iron tower, and bloody now he faced the closing ring and leaned on his red sword in that red hour. The life trickled down his hairy chest. His eyes were blazing suns of deathless hate. He shook his hair back like a lion's crest and staggered out, sword high to meet his fate. Aye, breast to breast, that final charge we met, and blind with blood and slaughter smote and slew. Our broken swords were ghastly red and wet, but still the bat-like pinions beat and flew. And fearful talons dragged us to our doom, and fiendish eyes flamed fearful through the gloom. Still in the west there burned a fading flame, when I rose reeling in a field of red. And searching for our warrior king, I came and found him dead upon a heap of dead. Demon and men, they lay silent and still, with cloven skull, rent heart, and torn breast. And now the moon was rising on the hill, and now the light was dying in the west. And I alone of all that mighty horde still held to life. Into a rough-hewed ring I bent with waning strength a broken sword, a diadem to gem a warrior king. And on his red brow set that bloody crown. Then life gave up the ghost as night came down. And then something completely different. One for You by Bob, talking about being lazy in the evening, laying in a hammock and dreaming. When, Bob was a person who had really interesting dreams. So this is called The Adventurer. Dusk on the sea. The fading twilight shift. The night winds bear the ocean's whisper dim. Wind, on your bosom many a phantom drift. A silver star climbs up the blue world rim. Wind, make the green leaves dance above me here, and idly swing my silken hammock so. Now on that glimmering molten silver mirror, send the long ripples wavering to and fro. And let your moon-white tresses touch my face, and let me know your slim-armed, cool embrace, while to my dreamy soul you whisper low. Dream, aye, I've dreamed since last night left her tower, and now again she comes on star-souled feet. Welcome, old friend. Here in this rose-gem bower I've drowsed away your sultan's golden heat. Here in my hammock, time I've dreamed away, for I have to stretch a hand out. Lo, I'm treading languorous shores of yesterday, moon-silvered deserts o'er the star-weird snow. I float o'er seas where ships are purple shells. I hear the tinkle of the camel's bells that waft down Cairo's street when dawn winds blow. South Seas. I watch when dusky twilight comes, making vague gods of ancient sea-set trees. The world path beckons, loud the mystic drums. Here at my hand the magic golden keys that fit the doors of romance, wonder, strange dim gossamer adventures, seas and stars. Why, I have roamed the far moon mountain range, where sunset minted gold in shimmering bars. All eager-eyed I've sailed from ports of Spain and watched the flashing topaz of the main, when dawn was flinging witch-fire on the spars. I'm content in dreams to roam my fill, the vagrant drifting sport of wind and tide, slave of the greater freedom, venture's thrill. Here every magic ship on which I ride, gold, green, blue, red, a priceless treasure trove, more wealth than ever pirate dared to dream. My hammock swings, above the world I roam. The sunset's dust, the dawning's gliding gleam, moon-dappled leaves are murmuring in the wind, which whisper tales. Lo, Tyre is just behind, through seas of dawn I sail, romance abeam. And happy birthday, Bob.
Hi, everyone. Jim here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Robert E. Howard and what he means to me today, and wish him a happy birthday for January 22nd. I've got a little toast here for him, a little whiskey, and I want to wish him a happy birthday. Here you go, Bob. Happy birthday. I just want to talk a little bit about how important Robert E. Howard was to me growing up. Now, not to get gatekeepy at all, but I'm 61. I've been reading Robert E. Howard since I was 14 years old. I was aware of him before that with the Conan comic books. But, to me, he was just Robert E. Howard, the guy who wrote Conan. And it wasn't until I bought the book Marches of Valhalla that I became aware of him more as a prose writer and his fiction. And as soon as I read that book and the stories in that book, it was like a lightning strike. And I just picked up everything I could of his after that point, and I still do to this day. And he's been a boon companion to me through the years, and I imagine he will be, on my deathbed as well. He'll be with me. But he was very inspiring to me, and what really struck me about him is, he became a writer in spite of his environment. He worked in this vacuum. He'd never met another writer, never met a publisher or an editor, and yet within that environment, he became a writer, and he thrived as a writer. And he could accomplish whatever he set his mind to. When one market dried up, he tried writing detective books or westerns or what have you, and he succeeded at that. And that was a good inspiration and a good example to me as a young man. And it's kind of what I passed on to my own children, was you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to. And that's what I take from Robert E. Howard. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to read The Vultures of Wahpeton for his birthday. I know his westerns don't get a lot of love all the time, but The Vultures of Wahpeton, Robert E. Howard kind of considered one of his finest stories, and but it didn't really get accepted until he wrote a happy ending for it. And I think Smashing Novels accepted it, and they ended up printing both versions anyway. So that's what I'll be reading for Robert E. Howard's birthday. Now, the book I'll be reading it from is End of the Trail, and this was edited by Rusty Burke. Now, there's a beginning here that I want to read. There's a blurb at the beginning, which I thought was kind of cool, and I'm going to read that out loud if that's okay. And this is by Robert E. Howard. This is a quote from him. Always the simple, strong men go into the naked lands and fight heroical battles to win and open those lands to civilization. Then comes civilization, mainly characterized by the smooth, the dapper, the bland, the shrewd men who play with business and laws and politics, and they gain the profits. They enjoy the fruit of other men's toil while the real pioneers starve. Well, they have gone into the night, a vast and silent caravan with their buckskins and their boots, their spurs and their long rifles, their wagons and their mustangs, their wars and their loves, their brutalities and their chivalries. They have gone to join their old rivals, the wolf, the panther, and the Indian, and only a crumbling adobe wall, a fading trail, the breath of an old song remain to mark the roads they traveled. But sometimes when the night wind whispers forgotten tales through the mesquite and the chaparral, it is easy to imagine that once again the tall grass bends to the tread of a ghostly caravan, that the breeze bears the jingle of stirrup and bridle chain, and that spectral campfires are winking far out on the plains. And that's by Robert E. Howard. And again, happy birthday, Bob.
Well, howdy, Bob. Jason Waltz here, wishing you a happy birthday and thanks for all the years of entertainment. I'm going to read a short poem of his that happens to be my second favorite. I think the most poetic thing Bob Howard ever wrote was that little stretch in The Queen of the Black Coast where Conan gets to talk about slaying and loving and living life. But I'm going to read what I think is Howard's Ozymandias, which is one of my favorite poems from Shelley, in case you didn't know. This is called A Man. I tore a pine from the mountain crag. I plunged it into the sea, and I wrote my names across the stars for all of eternity. I rocked the worlds with my chariots. I shook the seas with my pride, and at last I looked at my name in the stars, and I laid me down and died. The morns gave birth to the surging years. Year rose on dying year, but ever above in the flaming stars my name stood blazing clear. And the people came and the people went with their fetters and chains and bars, saying, I wonder what unknown man those strange words wrote on the stars. Thanks, Bob. And now, for your birthday, I'm going to randomly pick a story from this book, which, yes, you caught me. I haven't read this book. So I haven't read too much of the pure horror of Robert E. Howard. So let us, wherever a picture falls, I am going to be reading The Valley of the Lost. That's what I'm reading for your birthday. And I'm going to put my Cross Plains newspaper, Robert E. Howard Conan metal bookmark right there to hold that spot. Happy birthday, sir.
Hey, folks, Mark Finn here, and this is a special thing for Robert E. Howard's birthday. Happy birthday, Robert E. Howard, and thank you for all of the inspiration. When I first read Robert E. Howard, it was with a book that I got for my own birthday. It was the 8th volume in the Ace series of Conan stories. It was Conan the Usurper with that famous Frank Frazetta cover with the snake coming up through his legs while he's held in chains. Talk about just an iconic image that's going to burn into your head if this is your introduction to Conan. And my introduction to Conan, the first Robert E. Howard Conan story I read was Beyond the Black River. So no pressure there, right? For the rest of those Conan stories. It's still one of my favorite Conan stories. And so in honor of Howard's birthday and my birthday being this weird sort of confluence, I thought I would read a little bit of Beyond the Black River. This is the very beginning of the story, and I will try to do it as narratively and interestingly as possible. So this is part 1. Conan loses his axe. The stillness of the forest trail was so primeval that the tread of a soft-booted foot was a startling disturbance. At least it seemed so to the ears of the wayfarer, though he was moving along the path with the caution which must be practiced by any man who ventured beyond Thunder River. He was a younger man of medium height, with an open countenance and a mop of tousled tawny hair, unconfined by cap or helmet. His garb was common enough for that country, a coarse tunic belted at the waist, short leather breeches beneath, and soft buckskin boots that came short of the knee. A knife hilt jutted from one boot top. The broad leather belt supported a short, heavy sword and a buckskin pouch. There was no perturbation in the wide eyes that scanned the green walls which fringed the trail. Though not tall, he was well built, and his arms, that the short, wide sleeves of his tunic left bare, were thick with corded muscle. He tramped imperturbably along the last settler's cabin, although the last settler's cabin lay miles behind him, and each step was carrying him nearer the grim peril that hung like a brooding shadow over the ancient forest. He was not making as much noise as it seemed to him, though he well knew that the faint tread of his booted feet would be like a tocsin of alarm to the fierce ears that might be lurking in the treacherous green vastness. His carefree attitude was not genuine. His eyes and ears were keenly alert, especially his ears, for no gaze could penetrate the leafy tangle for more than a few feet in either direction. But it was instinct more than warning. By the external sense which brought him up suddenly, his hand on his hilt, he stood stock still in the middle of the trail, unconsciously holding his breath, wondering what he had heard, and wondering if he had heard anything. The silence seemed absolute. Not a squirrel chattered or bird chirped. Then his gaze fixed itself on a mass of bushes beside the trail a few yards ahead of him. There was no breeze, yet he had seen a branch quiver. The short hairs on his scalp prickled, and he stood for an instant, undecided, certain that a move in either direction would bring death streaking at him from the bushes. A heavy chopping crunch sounded behind the leaves. The bushes were shaken violently, and simultaneously with the sound, an arrow arched erratically from among them and vanished among the trees along the trail. The wayfarer glimpsed its flight as he sprang frantically to cover. Crouching behind a thick stem, his sword quivering in his fingers, he saw the bushes part, and a tall figure stepped leisurely into the trail. The traveler stared in surprise. The stranger was clad like himself in regard to boots and breeks, though the latter were of silk instead of leather. But he wore a sleeveless hauberk of dark mesh mail in place of a tunic, and a helmet perched on his black mane. That helmet held the other's gaze. It was without a crest, but adorned by short bull's horns. No civilized hand ever forged that headpiece, nor was the face below it that of a civilized man. Dark, scarred, with smoldering blue eyes, it was a face as untamed as the primordial forest from which its background. It was a face as untamed as the primordial forest which formed its background. The man held a broadsword in his right hand, and the edge was smeared with crimson. "Come on out," he called in an accent unfamiliar to the wayfarer. "All is safe now. There was only one of the dogs. Come on out." The other emerged dubiously and stared at the stranger. He felt curiously helpless and futile as he gazed on the proportions of the forest man. The massive iron-clad breast and the arm that bore the reddened sword burned dark by the sun and ridged and corded with muscles. He moved with the dangerous ease of a panther. He was too fiercely supple to be a product of civilization, even of the fringe of civilization which composed the outer frontiers. Turning, he stepped back to the bushes and pulled them apart. Still not certain what had just happened, the wayfarer from the east advanced and stared down into the bushes. A man lay there, a short, dark, thickly muscled man, naked except for a loincloth, a necklace of human teeth, and a brass armlet. A short sword was thrust into the girdle of the loincloth, and one hand still gripped a heavy black bow. The man had long black hair. It was about all the wayfarer could tell about his head, for his features were a mask of blood and brains. His skull had been split to the teeth. "A Pict, by the gods!" exclaimed the wayfarer. The burning blue eyes turned upon him. Are you surprised? Why, they told me at Blitrium and again at the settlers' cabins along the road that these devils sometimes sneaked across the border, but I didn't expect to meet one this far in the interior. You're only 4 miles east of Black River, the stranger informed him. They've been shot within a mile of the Blitrium. No settler between Thunder River and Fort Tusculum is really safe. I picked up this dog's trail 3 miles south of the fort this morning, and I've been following him ever since. I came up behind him just as he was drawing an arrow on you. Another instant, and there'd been a stranger in hell. But I spoiled his aim for him. The wayfarer was staring wide-eyed at the larger man, dumbfounded by the realization that the man had actually tracked down one of the forest devils and slain him unsuspected. That implied woodsmanship of a quality undreamed even for Conanohara. You're one of the fort's garrison? He asked. I'm no soldier. I draw the pay and rations of an officer of the line, but I do my work in the woods. Balanis knows I'm more use ranging along the river than cooped up in the fort. Casually, the slayer shoved the body deeper into the thicket with his foot, pulled the bushes together, and turned away down the trail. The other followed him. My name is Balthus, he offered. I was at Velitrium last night. I haven't decided whether I'll take up a hide of land or enter fort service. The land near Thunder River is already taken, grunted the slayer. Plenty of good land between Scalp Creek. You crossed it a few miles back in the fort, and that's getting too devilish close to the river. The Picts steal over to burn and murder like that one did. They don't always come singly. Someday they'll try to sweep the settlers out of Conanohara, and they may succeed. Probably will succeed. This colonization business is mad anyway. There's plenty of good land in the Bossonian marches if the Aquilonians would cut up some of the big estates of their barons and plant wheat now where only deer hunted. They wouldn't have to cross the border and take the land of the Picts away from them. That's queer talk coming from a man in the service of the governor of Conanohara, objected Balthus. It's nothing to me, the other retorted. I'm a mercenary. I sell my sword to the highest bidder. I never planted wheat and never will. Not so long as there are others who harvest to be reaped with the sword. But you Hyborians have expanded as far as you're allowed to expand. You've crossed the marches, burned a few villages, exterminated a few clans, and pushed back the frontiers of Black River. But I doubt you'll ever be able to hold what you've conquered, and you'll never push the frontier any further westward. Your idiotic king doesn't understand conditions here. He won't send you enough reinforcements, and there are not enough settlers to withstand the shock of a concerted attack from across the river. But the Picts are divided into small clans, persisted Balthus. They'll never unite. We can whip any single clan. Or any 3 or 4 clans, admitted the slayer. But some days a man will rise and unite 30 or 40 clans, just as was done among the Cimmerians when the Gundermen tried to push the border northward years ago. They tried to colonize the southern marches of Cimmeria, destroyed a few small clans, built a fort town, Venarium. You've heard the tale. So I have indeed, replied Balthus, wincing. The memory of that red disaster was a black blot in the chronicle of a proud and warlike people. My uncle was at Venarium when the Cimmerians swarmed over the walls. He was one of the few that escaped the slaughter. I've heard him tell that tale many a time. The barbarians swept out of the hills in a ravening horde without warning and stormed Venarium with such fury none could stand before them. Men, women, and children were butchered. Venarium was reduced to a mass of charred ruins, as it is to this day. The Aquilonians were driven back among the marches and have never tried to colonize the Cimmerian country. But you speak of Venarium familiarly. Perhaps you were there. I was, grunted the other. I was one of the horde that swarmed over the walls. I hadn't yet seen 15 snows, but already my name was repeated around the council fires. Balthus involuntarily recoiled, staring. It seemed incredible that this man walking tranquilly at his side should have been one of those screeching, blood-mad devils that had poured over the walls of Venarium on that long-gone day to make the streets run crimson. Then you too are a barbarian, he exclaimed involuntarily. The other nodded, without taking offense. I am Conan, the Cimmerian. That's as good a place as any to stop. And if you've never read Beyond the Black River, I did not do it justice. You need to go check it out. but I'm sure if you're watching this, you're probably already a fan. So raise a glass to Robert E. Howard and thank him for all the hours and days and weeks and months and years of quality reading and flights of fancy and vivid imaginations. He's inspired generations of people to do their own creative works, and he continues to inspire to this day. So happy birthday, Robert E. Howard, and thank you guys for watching.
For this last birthday wish, we're going to break format. I was doing a call with two gentlemen who run Check Your Shelf, Paul and Steve, and it turned into a discussion video that we had such a good time doing that I thought I would go ahead and play the entire thing for you instead of just editing it down to their 2 birthday wishes for Bob. I hope you enjoy this, and we'll see you on the back end. I'm with Steve and Paul from Check Your Shelf, and they would like to give a big shout out and happy birthday wish to Robert E. Howard. Gentlemen, please take it away.
Happy birthday, Bob. I feel like I would not have felt comfortable calling him Bob, but now that I've discovered the fight stories, I'm like, I feel like I'm getting to know him pretty well. And I have this parasocial relationship, and I hear other people call him Bob. His mama called him Bob. His daddy called him Bob.
He always introduced himself to people as "Call me Bob." So
there you go. All right.
Yeah, and I have a weird parasocial relationship with him because of the love of Barbara Allen, but what that might take a little while to explain.
I thought I would describe my long and sordid history with Robert E. Howard. First of all, fantastic writer. Obviously, we wouldn't be on here if he wasn't, right? There wouldn't be a whole foundation dedicated to him. But back in, well, first of all, we went and saw Conan the Barbarian when it was out. I didn't, I don't know. For all I knew, Arnold Schwarzenegger wrote it, right? I was just an idiot kid. But around 2002, Paul sent me, I know how these are viewed on this and other channels in this corner of BookTube.
That's all we had.
Conan 1 by Robert E. Howard, L. Sprague de Camp, and Lynn Carter. We did a show on this one. I don't need to go into it, but Paul gave me he wrote, and he told you earlier, John, when we were talking, that, and literally almost, he said, "To Steve, you are about to enter a world of fantasy as far removed from Tolkien as Mr. Baggins' world is from our own. Good luck, good reading, and may Crom be with you." It didn't stick. It didn't work. That's 2002, so we're decades into this, all right? It didn't stick. I started with Tolkien, so when I was reading this, to me, it was almost like too much was happening, I think. Plus, maybe not the best place. But time goes on. We start a BookTube channel. Pigeons from Hell, I think, was my first.
Well, we did Sumerian September, and in Sumerian September, we did Solomon Kane stories. But Pigeons from Hell is the one where you like lost your mind over how good it was. And that was the one that I had only just read really recently because the title of it always just put me off.
Pigeons from Hell. That's yeah, this isn't our show, right? I was going to go into the whole die like a duck thing, but this isn't our show. So we'll keep it somewhat civilized. Yeah, so Solomon Kane, oh my goodness. I finally read my first Conan story, Tower of the Elephant. And the reason I read that was we had the Secret Fire Books guy on, Tim, and he and Paul were going off about Tower of the Elephant. So I'm like, I probably should read that. So I read that. And I was like, wait a minute. We used to play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons when we were kids. I was like, this is a Dungeons and Dragons story. He's like, no, you got that backwards.
I ripped it off, as did all of us back in the day.
You got that backwards. So time goes on, and I'm at the library, and we talked about this on our channel. And every time now I go to a book, I'm a novice at all of this pulp stuff, right? But I'm loving it. And because of the BookTube channel, I'm learning so much. And I was at the library with my kids, and I was like, I'm going to see if they have any Robert E. Howard. They had one Robert E. Howard, and it was Waterfront Fists and others.
But it's such an odd thing to have in your library.
Yeah, and it was the only one they had. This is the downtown Indianapolis library, not like one of the annexes or something, right? It was the downtown central library. They have one Robert E. Howard in their fiction section. And I was like, well, I'm getting it. On the way home, my daughter was driving. On the way home, I'm reading the introduction and all that stuff. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to love this. And I've now read probably half a dozen of the stories. My favorite one is the titular Waterfront Fists. I love it. And it's Steve Costigan. It's the girl. It's the villains. It's the fight where, of course, he's going to lick the guy. And any trouble he has isn't because I love the fact in this story, he's like having a lot of trouble because the guy's a southpaw. And he's like trying to figure out the left-handed boxing thing. And he's like, and this guy was really tough. He's taller than me. He's lanky. He's hard to lay a hand on. Can't get a glove on him, all this stuff. But none of that's the reason that I'm losing. The reason I'm losing is he's cross-eyed. And every time I'm like trying to figure out where he's looking, I can't figure out, is he looking in the audience? Is he looking over there? I got one of those left swings upside my head, so it's not anything to do with my ability. It's this stupid guy being cross-eyed. So that is Steve Costigan, right?
Yeah.
The unreliable narrator.
Yeah. And just the way that thing is written, we recently learned why it was written the way it was written, but it seems so naturalistic for him that I can't help but think maybe that's just how he talked, like in real life.
Oh, yeah. Is that John? How did he talk in real life? Did he talk like Steve Costigan?
Allegedly, if you've seen the movie The Whole Wide World, which is based on Novelyn Price Ellis's memoir of dating Robert E. Howard for about the last 2 years of his life, I've been unable to nail this down completely, but Vincent D'Onofrio, who played Robert E. Howard, went to meet with Novelyn, and she was a speech and drama teacher. And she allegedly coached him on how Howard talked and moved, so that as you see Vincent in that movie, you're supposed to be seeing as close as an actual video or camera or film of Robert E. Howard as he moved and talked. I do not know that for a fact. I'm still trying to find out. One of the things I'm hoping for is one of the things we'll be celebrating at this year's Howard Days is the 30th anniversary of the film The Whole Wide World. And the guy who wrote it, whose name, forgive me, I can't remember now, he's usually showed up at several Howard Days in the past, and he may show up this year. So, I may get a chance to talk to him and say, is this true or not? But that's what I've heard, that Vincent D'Onofrio.
There's a video. There's a video floating around on YouTube that has an interview with him, and that's basically what he says in the interview. And apparently, like he was one of her the writer was one of her last students before she retired. So there's this long connection, and if people make stuff up all the time, but if his own words can be taken for gospel, and D'Onofrio is kind of one of those guys that sinks into whatever he does, so I wouldn't doubt it for a minute.
I know from reading in the past from the people who knew him in some of the biographies that they did say that he did have sort of that high voice that Vincent uses in the movie. So.
I did not realize Private Pile played Robert E. Howard.
You either love the movie or hate the movie. I love the movie for what it is, so it's worth checking out, I think.
Yeah.
Paul, what would you say? So we now know that obviously Tower of the Elephant's awesome. I think I might like Solomon Kane a little better than Conan, but I haven't read enough Conan to say that for sure. I'll have to decide if the fight stories are my favorite. I might make them my favorite just by decree, because I enjoy knowing something about something that Paul doesn't know anything about, because this whole booktube channel is nothing but Paul teaching me about pulp.
It's nice when someone does the heavy lifting.
Yeah. What would you say your favorite story or stories are, Paul?
Well, one quick thing about before I get to that is I had told Steve one of the reasons why I think he really likes the fight stories, particularly Steve Costigan, is because listening to him narrate I've been to many like cookouts with this guy and his family, and this is like the way his uncles all talked. So it was like a family reunion listening to him reading these stories. But I'm like, for me it's Solomon Kane. I little bit of history. I grew up like anybody my age who was a comic book nerd. I read the comics, you know, the Roy Thomas, or John Buscema comics. No, Sal Buscema. Loved them. Wore the covers off of them. Then the Arnold movie comes out, and it's obviously not Conan, but it's Conan enough that I ate it up. I even got the magazine comic book version that Buscema, he didn't even try. He didn't even try like, I'm gonna draw him to look like Arnold. Nope, because he knows who's gonna buy this comic. So he made him look like the way he always drew him, and I love those. And
like this guy.
Yes,
you look like that.
I'll have to show you some of his comics one day. But I kind of got into the Conan stories, through those nefarious Ace books. And in the 90s, or the late 80s and 90s, I managed to get a copy of the Cthulhu Mythos, which led to these great books. And I ate these things up. These things were, they were like, I loved Conan, but to find so much other characters that he'd created, just it was like each month there was a new book out, and it was like a whole new universe full of characters. But I eventually gravitated, as I'm pulling out all my props, I eventually gravitated to Solomon Kane. There's just something about his religious fanaticism, and like that, just his he may think he's on a holy war, but I think he's on like a death wish, honestly. But the Solomon Kane stories speak to me, specifically Hills of the Dead. And the reason why, like a lot of people like Wings in the Night, and Wings in the Night is great. It's a great story, but I love vampires and zombies and stuff like that. And the finale for Hills of the Dead is like epic to me. I can it's one of the stories that I can visualize how it all came about. I know there's an illustrated version of it, but that's not what I see when I read that story. And
that's
then
somebody else's version.
It's good.
Yeah.
I can't remember who the artist was for. I don't have my big Solomon Kane omnibus around here for some reason, or I'd look it up for us. But
maybe it's in the bathroom.
But I just really like. I fell in love with Pigeons from Hell, and I fell in love with For the Love of Barbara Allen, just because it's such an odd story for a guy who writes people getting their heads lopped off and shot, and bosomy women and all this. It's just this tender little like weird love story that's just so out of pocket that I just became obsessed with it for a while. And the fact that I grew up, I'm old, but I'm not that old. I grew up listening to various versions of Barbara Allen because my parents like that kind of old timey music. So it was just kind of cool to like. I'm going through. I forget which one of the books has it off the top of my head, and I'm like, For the Love of Barbara, what? So I read it. I'm like, this. It was just so different, and that's one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite stories.
Y'all did a great video on For the Love of Barbara Allen.
Yeah.
I centered. I'll be totally honest with you. I focused and centered the entire month so that I could end on that video as like a little coda to send the month off. So yeah, thank you. I put a lot of work into it.
Yeah, I think I wrote to y'all at the time that most people don't know that Bob Howard loved folk songs like that and old songs like that, and that he had a long-going correspondence with Robert Gordon, who was Library of Congress had tapped to go and collect all the folk songs.
Mm.
And they were discussing all the various folk songs. He would be sitting in his letters, hey, have you heard, I don't think you've seen these versions of this folk song to
Oh.
Robert Gordon, and Robert Gordon would write it back, say, yeah, thanks. Have you seen this? So you
Yeah.
definitely see that in his use of For the Love of Barbara Allen for that story.
And his Howard's obsession with past lives and ancestral memories and stuff, it makes total sense that he would write it. It was just such an interesting, nothing like it that I've read of his since,
All right. Well, gentlemen, do you have anything else to say, or would you like to give a toast or birthday wish to Bob?
A quick shout out or two. If you want to know more about the fighting stories, obviously you could always go to the Robert E. Howard Foundation. You could also Nick from the book Graveyard has been a boxer. He's trained as a boxer, loves Robert E. Howard fight stories as well, and has a bunch of other fighting type stuff. So check out his channel. He has a great channel as well. The other shout out is probably not my place to do, but if you wanted to do it, you're probably going to do it, is the Howard Days and the House Rescue plea for donations.
Well, I'll probably do that at the end of the video.
That makes sense.
So,
all right, you can fix that in post.
Yeah.
I'm always saying that to Paul. But yeah, let's do a toast.
All right.
I have here it's noon where I am. About 12:30. As Sailor Steve Costigan might say, the sun's over the yardarm somewhere. But I happen to be drinking Ritual Zero Proof Whiskey Alternative.
And I'm drinking some serious gourmet shit. So cheers.
Thank you to Bob. Thank you to Bob's mom for birthing him on this day. And thank you to the Robert E. Howard Foundation for keeping the memory alive and for doing this. And gosh, I tell you what, man, I still probably have a good 30, 40 years left in me. And so I don't have to regret not having discovered Howard sooner. But here's to
say it any better.
Here's to Robert E. Howard and all his fans.
Bob.
To you, Bob. Thanks. Happy 120th.
To Bob.
Thank you to the many Howard fans that have contributed to this video birthday card to Bob on his 120th birthday. Now, if you'll join me in raising a glass with your favorite adult beverage. To Bob Howard, thank you for sharing with us your tremendous imagination and your incredible ability to put words together in so many beautiful ways in prose and poetry. And thank you for the never-ending hours of enjoyment we get in reading them. Happy 120th birthday, Bob. Thanks to everyone for doing this, and we'll see you next year.